In everyone's youth, there's often that one person who makes your heart skip a beat. When I was 20, I met Mr. Shepherd. Our first encounter was, in fact, an accident. I was originally accompanying my aunt to a blind date. My aunt didn't want to stay at that person's house, so she had been living in my flat since returning from abroad. That day was her blind date, and she handed me an outfit identical to hers, calling it aunt-niece matching outfits. I looked at her, utterly confused, but she just urged me to change quickly. Then she did my makeup beautifully and took me along to the blind date. I was puzzled. Who brings family members to a blind date? Moreover, it was her date, yet she was dolling me up instead of herself. I didn't understand. I really didn't understand. Just as we entered the Starbucks, my aunt suddenly said she had a stomach ache and needed the loo. She asked me to go ahead and find her blind date, Mr. Shepherd, explain why she was late, and apologize. I was reluctant, but given my aunt's authority, I went anyway. When I first saw Mr. Shepherd, he reminded me of a cat. Not that he looked like one, but the feeling he gave off, lazy, casual, cool, and distant. Mr. Shepherd had the charm of a mature man, tall with well-proportioned muscles. Especially those slightly upturned almond eyes, so languid. When he wasn't smiling, he seemed cool and distant, but when he did smile, he was incredibly alluring. This man could be the ruin of nations, I thought. Before I could approach him, my aunt video called me on WhatsApp. I answered, and she immediately hung up. Then I saw the message that made my head spin. Darling niece, please cover for your aunt on this blind date. I've got plans to party with friends today, but your dad's keeping tabs on me. Just chat with him, complete the task, and then explain everything. Be good, love you lots. Mwah. Only then did I realize I'd been set up by my aunt. So, with a smile on my face but tears in my heart, I went over. Hello, Mr. Shepherd, I greeted him as I sat down. Mr. Shepherd looked at me with a smile, his beautiful almond eyes sparkling, enough to make anyone's heart flutter. I forced myself to stay focused, but I didn't know what to say. It was very awkward, and I could only keep reminding myself not to be bewitched by his good looks. Finally, Mr. Shepherd broke the silence. You must be Miss Willow? I stammered in awe and quickly nodded. Yes, I'm Emily Willow. Nice to meet you. I'm Luke Shepherd, a detective inspector. Detective inspector? I was suddenly excited. I've always loved police officers. Perhaps my expression was too animated, as Mr. Shepherd chuckled. No need to be nervous, Miss Willow. We don't arrest people at random. No, I'm not nervous. It's just that I once considered applying to the police academy, but various reasons prevented me from doing so. Mr. Shepherd continued smiling, sipping his coffee as he did. My eyes darted around before secretly settling on him. Even drinking coffee, he was so elegant. While he was occupied with his coffee, I quietly took out my phone to contact my aunt. I said all the right things, advocating for her marriage, until she finally agreed to exchange WeChat contacts with him. And so, shamelessly, I obtained his WhatsApp number. As the conversation was drawing to a close, I blushed and told him I was there on behalf of my aunt. I sincerely apologized and even gave him a deep bow. Mr. Chamberlain chuckled. No need to apologize, little one. I'm not cross with you. I was about to look at him with gratitude when I belatedly realized his tone was off, as if he was teasing me. Little one? You're not that old, and I'm not that young. I'm 20, you know. Mr. Chamberlain smiled gently. Don't be upset. I was just joking. Only then did I understand that Mr. Chamberlain saw I was nervous and was trying to help me relax. My face reddened again. Well, goodbye then, Mr. Chamberlain. I wanted nothing more than to flee the scene with my burning cheeks. Just as I was about to make a run for it, Mr. Chamberlain called out to me. I turned back. Yes, Mr. Chamberlain? He suddenly asked, May I ask your name? I snapped out of my daze. Out of politeness, I should have introduced myself. I'm Winifred Fairbairn. Mr. Chamberlain nodded with a smile and said, Perhaps we'll meet again. And so we parted ways. The first thing I did when I got home was to complain to my aunt, which ended with her promising to treat me to 3 Sunday roasts as compensation. Later, I asked my aunt how things went with the handsome Mr. Chamberlain. She said that after they exchanged greetings, they hardly spoke at all. She added that this Arthur Chamberlain was too cold and stern, not the kind of man she was looking for. I didn't believe it. The Arthur Chamberlain I saw was a kind man who loved to smile. So I carefully scrolled through Arthur Chamberlain's Facebook posts from 2014 to 2022, but couldn't find any evidence of him being cold or stern. I had no idea how my aunt came to that conclusion. In my aunt's words, my judgment was poor. In the days that followed, Arthur Chamberlain's image and smile kept appearing in my mind. I felt I was going mad. But I never saw him again. Sometimes I would stare at his WhatsApp profile picture, not knowing how to start a conversation. Should I be casual? Serious? Flippant? Or, we probably wouldn't cross paths again. I tried to delete his contact several times, but each time 1,000 reasons popped into my head telling me not to. Fine, he's just a stranger. I'll keep his contact, I thought, trying to deceive myself. Half a month later, that person held a banquet. My aunt persuaded me to attend, despite my reluctance. I was extremely unwilling to come to such banquets. They were troublesome affairs, with people fawning over each other. It was quite annoying. I wasn't very friendly to the men who tried to chat me up, giving them a hard time. After a few rounds, word spread about the arrogant and overbearing Miss Fairbairn, and people stopped bothering me. However, at this banquet, I saw Arthur Chamberlain. Gone was his gentle and casual demeanor from before. Now he appeared cold and aloof, a far cry from the kind-eyed Mr. Chamberlain in my memory. Yet, he was still breathtakingly handsome. Walking ahead of him was a middle-aged man with a serious expression, looking stern and humorless. I saw him, but he didn't see me. I hid in an inconspicuous spot, secretly watching him. His every move exuded nobility. I was so engrossed that I didn't notice someone approaching me. The newcomer called out, "Miss Fairbairn." I nodded to indicate I'd heard. The man seemed taken aback by my lack of manners and was momentarily speechless. I glanced at him and said, "Excuse me," then prepared to leave. However, before I could take 2 steps, a woman rushed up and slapped me hard across the face. The slap was so loud it drew the attention of many nearby onlookers. Arthur Chamberlain noticed me too. "You hussy." Acting all high and mighty while seducing other people's boyfriends. Have you no shame? I didn't recognize this woman. I figured she must be sent by some man I'd humiliated, wanting to embarrass me in return. I slapped her back immediately. First, I haven't seduced anyone's so-called boyfriend. Second, you should know your place. I've humiliated plenty of men, and I don't know which fool is using you as a pawn. You've got no brains. Third, do you really think I'd want the men you're interested in? Tell whoever's behind you to be more direct next time. This trick is so childish even primary school kids don't use it anymore. She seemed to be furious with embarrassment and raised her hand to strike again, but her wrist was caught by someone. It was Arthur Chamberlain. His face was ice cold, his gaze like that of a venomous snake, making the woman cower. If you know what's good for you, get lost. The woman scurried away immediately. I felt I was probably going to be even more embarrassed. "Thank you, Mr. Chamberlain," I said, rubbing my nose to hide my awkwardness. Arthur Chamberlain just smiled, "It's nothing. But it seems you're often bullied." I didn't like how he put it. Not at all. "Didn't you see how fierce I was just now?" Arthur Chamberlain chuckled, "Yes, you were very fierce." I suddenly felt a bit defeated. It didn't feel good to lose face in front of him. But his interruption had eased my nervousness and awkwardness. "Mr. Chamberlain, how do you have time for such a useless banquet? Aren't you busy with work? The department gave me 2 weeks off, but I can be called back any time if needed." I curiously pointed at the stern middle-aged man. "Who's that?" "That's my father." So he was here unwillingly too. I suddenly felt a sense of kinship with him. Seeing me silent, Arthur Chamberlain suddenly smiled lightly. "Miss Fairbairn, I've heard you have quite a fierce reputation, but why do I feel like you're actually a little lamb?" I disliked it most when people called me weak. Nonsense. I'm not at all. I'm very fierce. You just haven't seen it. All those men were scared away by me. Arthur Chamberlain glanced elsewhere, suppressing a smile as he nodded. Then you must have, single-handedly, cut off all your potential romances. They're not worth calling romances. Compared to you, they're like rubbish. I wouldn't want them even if they were given to me for free. I blurted this out without thinking, only realizing afterward that it might be inappropriate. Actually, there was nothing wrong with it, but I felt guilty, afraid he might see through my thoughts. So I blushed again. I stammered, well, I have something to do. I'll be going now. Then I fled in a panic, leaving Arthur Chamberlain standing there, bewildered. How embarrassing. I'd blushed twice in front of him. I was extremely frustrated. How could I face him after this? Never mind, maybe I won't see him again, I consoled myself. But thinking this way made me feel very disappointed. It was truly vexing. And so, with thoughts of Arthur Chamberlain on my mind, I started my new term at university. On the first day back, I encountered a rather troublesome situation. After finishing up at school, my classmate pulled me aside and told me to go check something out at the school gates. I was confused, but she insisted I'd understand once I saw it. When I reached the gates, I saw someone kneeling there, holding a banner that read, Winifred, I'm sorry. Barnaby Quartermain? How dare he? If I had any lingering affection for him before, it was now replaced by nothing but contempt and disgust. I looked at him coldly and said, what exactly are you trying to do? To my surprise, he even started crying. I'm so sorry, Winifred. It's all my fault. Please forgive me? A crowd had gathered, most of them pointing and whispering about me, saying I was heartless and how could I be so cruel when my boyfriend had gone to such lengths. How ridiculous. What did they know? As I listened to his rambling apologies and the crowd's accusations, I felt a headache coming on. I scrolled through my contacts, but couldn't find anyone I could call for help. My aunt had already left for across the pond. Suddenly, I thought of Arthur Chamberlain. Although this situation was embarrassing, I really had no other solution. Barnaby was being such a nuisance. After hesitating for a moment, I decided to contact him. Mr. Chamberlain, there's someone causing trouble for me at my school gates. Could I ask for your help? I didn't have much hope that he would reply or actually be able to help me. But to my surprise, he replied instantly. Send me the school address. I gave him the address and waited anxiously for his arrival. There were many onlookers eager for drama, and I found myself surrounded by their judgmental stares and whispers. I could only think to myself, one could live without making such a spectacle. It wasn't long before Arthur arrived. He pushed through the crowd and, upon seeing the absurd scene before him, furrowed his brow slightly. Behind Arthur came a few men in suits who, without a word, picked up Barnaby and carried him away. The last thing Barnaby said was that he would come find me again. But I never saw him after that. The crowd dispersed soon after. I breathed a sigh of relief and smiled at Arthur. Thank you, Mr. Chamberlain. With the term just starting, I didn't have much to do, and he had just solved a big problem for me. I felt very grateful, so I thought to invite him for a meal. To be honest, I had an ulterior motive. I wanted to spend more time with him. To my surprise, he agreed. Although my writing income wasn't much, I always thought of Arthur as someone of high status, and I didn't want to disappoint him. So I chose a rather upscale restaurant to treat him to some traditional British cuisine. Arthur ordered some dishes, and strangely enough, they were all foods I had loved since childhood. Arthur's taste in food seemed to have a lot in common with mine. That person just now, was he your boyfriend? He asked. I quickly corrected him, ex-boyfriend. He's disgusting. He cheated on me, and when I exposed him, he pulled this stunt. No wonder my aunt says I have poor taste in men. If anyone gives you trouble in the future, just come to me. Oh. I was both surprised and secretly delighted by his offer. And don't call me Mr. Chamberlain anymore. You can call me Arthur. He rested his chin on his hand and smiled at me, nearly making me blush again. I nervously agreed and said a few words, though I was so flustered I hardly knew what I was saying or how he responded. Can I call you Arthur? I asked. He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Call me whatever you like. I quickly adapted, calling him Arthur from then on. I didn't want to call him Mr. Chamberlain, it made him sound old. At the table, he told me a lot about himself, his family, and his past. I only vaguely glossed over my own history. I always felt I wasn't good enough for him. Yes, I liked him, but I didn't deserve him. He was born excellent, while I was covered in mud and full of scars. I felt some regret. When it came time to pay, the staff said the bill had already been settled. I looked at Arthur in confusion, but he just smiled and said, "Let's go." I followed him out, feeling a bit awkward. He drove me back to school and then left. I watched his retreating figure for a long time. When I got back, my friends teased me, saying they saw a handsome hero come to my rescue. They asked if Arthur was my boyfriend, but I immediately denied it. This kind of thing shouldn't be said carelessly. If it got back to Arthur, what would he think of me? In life, it's best to err on the side of caution. In the days that followed, we chatted often. He shared interesting things from his life, mostly about happenings at the police station, but I listened with great interest. Because it was coming from him. At the end of November, I was forced to go home again. That person, my father, had arranged a marriage for me without my consent. We had a huge argument, and he hit me. He even took away my flat. I was homeless now. He was forcing my hand. I sat dejectedly on a bench at the bus stop outside the school, feeling utterly miserable. His wife, his son, their home, what reason did I have to go back there? His son never acknowledged me as his sister. When I was small and weak in primary school, he always bullied me. His wife either beat or scolded me, and he always turned a blind eye. I attended a so-called prestigious secondary school, but the atmosphere there was terrible. There was constant competition, rumors, isolation, and bullying. They spread rumors that I was an illegitimate child. One girl led the others in ostracizing me, and when some boys tried to bully me, I fought back and beat one of them. Then my father beat me and made me kneel for 3 days as punishment. And that boy who tried to bully me? He's now my arranged fiancé. Yes, as a daughter, I was nothing more than a tool for forming alliances through marriage. It was getting dark. My phone had been smashed by my father, my laptop was in the flat, and he had changed the locks so I couldn't get in. I sat there like a statue, motionless and tearless. Suddenly, someone called out my name urgently. Arthur? My first thought was of him. No one else would call me Winifred. I looked up and saw him. He seemed shocked to see me in such a state, frozen in place for a few seconds. Arthur, my voice was hoarse, why did you come looking for me? I didn't want him to see me in such a miserable state. I was afraid he would be disgusted by me. He frowned deeply, one hand gently touching my face. Who hit you? I lowered my head in silence. His breathing became heavy. I could feel his anger. I called you, but there was no answer. I texted you, but got no reply. I had no choice but to come to your school to find you. You told me earlier you were going home. The bruise on your face, was it your father who hit you? I nodded. My phone is broken, my flat was taken away by my father, and my laptop is in the flat. I didn't mean to ignore your messages. How could I ever ignore your messages? Arthur stood still for a few seconds, then suddenly pulled me into a tight embrace, as if he wanted to meld me into his very bones. He had never crossed any boundaries before, so this sudden hug caught me completely off guard. That home of yours, don't ever go back there again. I choked up and nodded. Later, he took me back to his place and helped me apply medicine to my bruises. He told me that as a young lady, it wasn't good to have scars on my face. I haven't been in the mood for school these past few days, so I took a week off and stayed at his place. Today, Arthur came home from work early. Arthur, are you home so early today? I asked. Arthur Chamberlain smiled. Yes, there's not much going on at the station lately. I've taken a few days off. There's a cocktail party at my father's place this afternoon, and I need to attend. Another party. Wait, a cocktail party? There must be many women there. A strange feeling of jealousy washed over me. I want to go too. Can you take me with you? I asked. Arthur sat down beside me. I thought you didn't like these parties. I unleashed my talent for making things up. Well, I think that as a person, one needs to be well-rounded and have good social skills. I should practice that. Arthur chuckled and agreed. I hadn't prepared any clothes, so I just wore a fluffy white dress. I was a bit worried. Was my appearance not dazzling enough? What if someone outshined me in front of Arthur? Strange thoughts indeed. After a few drinks, an old man suddenly gestured for everyone to be quiet, saying he had an announcement to make. When I saw who was standing next to him, my whole body froze. It was Crispin Shaw, the man I was engaged to. Apparently, what he wanted to announce was my engagement to Crispin Shaw. Crispin seemed to recognize me and came over to chat. After all these years, he still looked like a hooligan. A pile of rubbish in designer clothes. As usual, I didn't give him a pleasant look. Winifred, don't be so cold to me. We're old classmates after all. Get lost, I said coldly. He grinned, unfazed. You're going to be my wife soon. You should at least soften your temper a bit. Do you need something? Arthur pulled me behind him. I'm talking to my wife. What's it to you? Arthur sneered, is that so? Has Winifred acknowledged you? Winifred Fairbairn will be mine sooner or later. I should have had her back in secondary school. As soon as he finished speaking, Arthur kicked him to the ground. You dare call her Winifred Fairbairn? You'd better take back what you said, or I'll beat you every time I see you. The cocktail party was disrupted by this commotion, and Crispin's father looked very displeased. Arthur gave them a cold look and left with me. Back home, Arthur was somewhat silent. I felt his mood seemed off. Arthur, what's wrong? Arthur sighed, why didn't you tell me about your engagement to that scum? I didn't know how to say it. I was afraid. I was afraid he'd tell me to go through with the marriage, and I was also afraid he'd say something like Winifred can finally get married. That would mean he never loved me. Even though I knew he didn't love me, I didn't want to hear such words from his mouth. It would drive me mad. It's all right, don't be scared. I'll help you sort this out. He patted my head. A week later, I went back to school as usual. I was still shamelessly living at his place. He would cook for me when he got off work, never repeating dishes, always 4 dishes and a soup. On Friday, I finished school early, so I bought a bouquet of roses and waited for him outside the police station, planning to surprise him. But at the moment I saw him, my heart sank completely. A young woman with a curvaceous figure was holding his arm, chatting and laughing. The woman even reached out and pinched Arthur's cheek, and Arthur just smiled, accepting it compliantly. The woman was very beautiful, charming, and seductive. She looked perfect with him. I retreated to a corner, watching them leave in a car. After that, I didn't go back home. I decided to disappear from his life. Completely disappear. I couldn't bear to watch him being intimate with another woman, nor could I bear to watch him marry someone else and have children. If that's the case, it's better not to meet at all. Arthur texted asking why I hadn't come home yet. I said I had applied for dormitory accommodation and wouldn't be coming back. At that moment, I had a faint hope in my heart. Would he ask me to stay? Instead, he sent a message, then when will you come to pick up your clothes? My heart twisted in pain, as if someone was squeezing it. It really hurt. I said, I don't want the clothes anymore, just throw them away. He didn't reply for a long time. After that, when he texted me, I only gave polite responses. During that short period, I always avoided him, not seeing him, claiming I was very busy. I was in agony. Another month passed like this. During this month, I was busy with my major courses, with a pile of things to do. Besides my studies, I had to write to earn money, because I didn't want a penny from that person. Moreover, having something interesting to do always helps people temporarily forget certain things. During this time, my dad called me. He said it was his wife's birthday party, and I should attend. I hung up the phone immediately. Should? What do you mean by should? I will never forget that it was that woman who made me lose my mom. I hate both of them, husband and wife. So when the winter holiday came, I didn't go home as usual. I rented a small room by myself, working part-time jobs and writing novels, day after day. One day, the shop had overtime work, and it was very late when I got back. There weren't many people on the road. I called a taxi and directly got into the back seat. I'm not used to sitting with others. It was dark at night, and I was very tired, so I didn't notice there was someone in the front passenger seat. Soon I started to doze off, but I wasn't sleeping deeply. Vaguely, I felt it was very bumpy. I suddenly woke up. This isn't right. The road home shouldn't be this bumpy. I realized something was wrong. In desperation, I opened the car door and jumped out. I didn't know where this desolate place was. I fell hard on the ground and rolled several times, my whole body in pain. But hearing the urgent braking sound behind me, I quickly got up and ran towards the woods, ignoring the pain. I was about to take out my phone to call the police when I reached into my pocket and realized that my phone must have fallen out when I jumped from the car. I felt a bit desperate. I looked back and saw the driver and another person had also gotten out and were chasing after me. One was short and looked sleazy, the other was burly with a deadpan face. It's impossible to say I wasn't scared now. I ran for my life. I didn't dare to look back anymore. No matter where I ran, I just needed to hide. If I could hide, I would be safe. The cold winter wind felt like it was cutting my throat. I tasted blood in my mouth. I saw a small steep slope, perfect for hiding. I quickly jumped down and hid under the soil layer. I tried to keep my breathing as quiet as possible. Because I heard footsteps above my head and the heavy breathing of two men. What should we do, bro? How are we going to explain to the boss if that girl got away? Shut up and keep looking. Boss? Listening to their conversation, I seemed to guess something. Could it be that woman? My heart was pounding as their footsteps kept pacing above. Why aren't they leaving? Leave already! Perhaps heaven heard my prayers, their footsteps finally faded away. My nerves relaxed a little. I suddenly remembered that I always carry a smartwatch with me. I quickly opened WhatsApp. The first person I thought of was Arthur. Besides him, I had no one else I could trust. I sent him my location first, then called him, turning the volume down low. I was very afraid that he might be asleep or wouldn't answer. After a while, the call connected. Winifred? His voice was still gentle. I don't know why, but as soon as I heard his voice, I cried pathetically. I had never cried before, except for the year my mum died. Arthur, please save me. I sent you my location. Someone wants to kill me. By the end, I couldn't control my sobs. Arthur was silent for a second on the other end. Don't be afraid. I'll be there right away. Hide well. Then he hung up. I wiped my tears messily, tucked the watch back into my clothes, and curled up into a ball. I tried hard not to cry, but every time I thought of Arthur, I felt unbearably wronged. I seemed to have cried myself into confusion. I didn't even notice when those two men came up behind me. My whole body broke out in a cold sweat. The tall man roughly yanked me out and threw me on the ground. I was stunned by the fall and couldn't get up for a while. Bro, this chick looks pretty good. The tall one glanced at him and handed the short one a small knife. Finish it quickly, then kill her. Looking at the short man's ugly, lecherous face, I felt a wave of disgust. Let me go. Whatever that person can give you, I can give you too. I tried to stall for time. Girl, blame your bad luck. It's not that we want to kill you, but we're just doing our job. Try to understand us. The short man pounced on me, frantically tearing at my clothes, using the knife to cut them open. No matter how I punched him, I couldn't break free. Arthur, save me, Arthur. I kept repeating his name in my heart. I felt so cold, so cold. My clothes were mostly cut up, and the cold wind entered my body, making me shiver. Am I going to die? Why? Why do you all bully me like this? What did I do wrong? Suddenly, I felt very angry, very angry. I grabbed the blade with my hand, blood flowing freely, but I seemed to feel no pain. I snatched the knife from his hand and without hesitation, stabbed it into his neck. Blood immediately spurted out. It was still warm. I pushed him away forcefully, watching him twitch on the ground a couple of times before he died. Only then did I realize I had killed someone. A chill and fear rose from the bottom of my heart. The tall man seemed to sense something was wrong and turned to run over. I seemed to be frightened stupid. I couldn't run anymore. He glared at me fiercely and kicked me to the ground. I just felt my stomach hurt so much. There was a sweet, bloody taste in my mouth. What followed was a beating of fists and kicks. My clothes were all cut up, and now his every kick landed directly on my flesh, causing me unbearable pain. Just when I thought I was about to die, a gunshot rang out. The tall man fell with a thud. By this time, I was extremely weak and had no strength to even look at who had come. Winifred! Arthur! He took off his coat and covered me with it, then carried me to the car. After that, police sirens sounded. When I woke up, I was already in the hospital. Apart from some knife wounds, there wasn't much wrong with me. Arthur saw that I was awake and carefully helped me raise the bed. I had a wooden expression. Arthur, I killed someone. Does this count as self-defense? Will I have to go to prison? Don't overthink it. This was clearly self-defense. Leave the rest to me to handle. You just rest well. I was discharged from the hospital not long after. Arthur Chamberlain had sorted everything out for me. Although we still kept in touch, I only replied to him politely. However, the seed of longing had taken root in my heart. I couldn't control myself from thinking about him. He was in my mind all the time, and I even felt that every male protagonist in my stories was him. He had invaded my life, leaving me beyond redemption. I started drinking, trying to numb myself with alcohol. On the day I was supposed to submit my manuscript, I hadn't written a single word. I asked my editor for an extension. My mind was in utter chaos, so I went to the pub again and drank all day long. Arthur called me many times, but I didn't answer any of them. A man came over to chat me up, and we had a few drinks together. Then his hands started groping my chest. I tried to push him away, but my head was spinning. Suddenly, there was a scream, and the man who had been chatting me up was kicked far away. I thought I saw Arthur. My vision was blurry from drinking. In the past, when I was drunk, I would see Arthur too. But every time it was just an illusion. He had never come looking for me. I sneered inwardly, waved my hand, and continued drinking. To my surprise, that person picked me up and forcibly took me away. I pounded on him hard, cursing Arthur for being a bastard. I kept cursing all the way. Arthur brought me back to his house again. He was busy in the kitchen, seemingly making chicken soup for me. I staggered behind him, hugged him tightly, and suddenly started crying. Arthur Chamberlain, you bastard. Why did you treat me like that when you have a girlfriend? I hate you, I hate you. You lied to me, you lied to me. Arthur turned around and looked at me calmly. You're drunk. I pushed him away fiercely. Do you know how much I like you? Arthur seemed stunned. I cried even harder, shouting hysterically, as if I wanted to vent all the resentment, anger, and longing I had been holding back for so long. If you like someone else, why were you so nice to me? Why did you have to be kind to me? Couldn't you just ignore me? Do you know that you're in my head every day? I can't write anything. Every time I start writing, every protagonist is you. I hate you, I hate you. I rubbed my hair in frustration and disappointment, crying my heart out. Then I fell into a strong, warm embrace. I looked at him dizzily and suddenly kissed him. Our lips and tongues intertwined passionately. That night, I seemed to hear him say sorry many times. When I woke up in the morning, my head was still aching a bit. Arthur was lying by my bed. As soon as I moved, he woke up. Winifred. I recalled that I seemed to have gotten drunk last night, and he had brought me back. I nodded and said thank you, then prepared to get out of bed and leave. But he grabbed my ankle. I was startled and asked, "What are you doing?" He smiled and said, "You can't just take advantage of me and not take responsibility." I feel so wronged. We've kissed and hugged, so why don't you marry me? My brain short-circuited. He continued, think carefully about what happened last night. I really did think about it seriously, and as I remembered, my nose started bleeding. I had confessed my feelings and forcibly kissed someone. Was that really me last night, crying and making a scene? I lost my wits completely, not even noticing my nosebleed. Arthur carefully wiped the blood from my nose. I came to my senses and hastily wiped it myself, saying, "It's just a little, it's fine, it's fine." Then I remembered that alluring woman. Let me ask you, who was that woman holding your hand in front of the police station that day? Which one? He looked puzzled for a moment. I said indignantly, that one. Arthur chuckled, that was my aunt. I was full of questions. So that's how it was. After I stopped the bleeding and finished washing up, I found Arthur leaning against the WC door, smiling at me. I was really startled by him. What is it? I asked. Arthur came over, and I kept backing away until he had me pinned against the sink. There was nowhere to retreat. Why don't you consider what I said earlier, little Winifred? I closed my eyes and calmed myself down. Then let me confess again. I like you, Arthur Chamberlain. Do you like me? I like you, very much. Arthur's bedroom eyes were full of tenderness, and I fell into them unexpectedly. Looking back, I might have fallen for him from the first time we officially met.